my background was mostly in horror and then science fiction and fantasy. And I did this wild foray into middle grade books, middle grade detective novels specifically. That's partly influenced by the fact that I'm also a middle school teacher. I've been worked at a middle school for the last 5 years or so. Oh man, no, I guess it's been longer than that now I think about it. But yeah, so I've been working at middle school for quite a while now. Once the students find out that you're an author, they're like, "Hey, Mr. Broaddus, is there something of yours that we can read?" And I'm looking at my catalog, going, "No, there's not. Not unless I won a lot of conferences with your parents about what I'm doing over here." So it made it a lot easier for me to just start writing middle grade novels, give them something to read. In my spare time, such as it is, I also do a lot of community organizing. So it's also working a lot in the neighborhood with a group of organized neighbors. We do a lot of basically it boils down to leadership training of young people to become gifts and stewards of the community. So that's me in a nutshell.
It's a good start, but there's so much to the majesty that is Maurice Broaddus. We're going to try and break into a little bit tonight. It occurs to me that you are the first guest on the program that I have ever helped move. So, so trying to figure out how you got going. I know that you earned a Bachelor of Science in biology for Purdue, and you worked for 2 decades as an environment toxicologist, which, as one does, that obviously is a straightforward path toward being an author.
Absolutely.
You first want to be an author.
Oh, I'm sorry, you missed that last part.
Oh, what's your first memory of wanting to be an author?
Of wanting to be an author? I don't know if I ever wanted to be an author. I've been writing for as long as I can. So that's back to like 2nd grade when my teacher basically just gave me a stack of paper and just said, "Hey, just create stuff." And so I've always just sort of been down with the pen, as it were. In 5th grade, I remember winning a citywide essay contest. And then in high school, my teachers in high school sort of were like, "Wait, we think we think you got something here." So they really encouraged me when it came to creative writing, and just not just encouraging me, pushing me, because they're just like, no, we get what high school students are doing, but we need to push you a little further. So I was like, okay. So I've always, I don't remember a specific point where I was like, I want to be a writer per se. Other than when I was in college, and what was I get? I got an honorable mention in the Isaac Asimov's undergraduate writing contest. And when I got that, that's when I took that as a sign of, well, maybe I am meant to do this. So I'd say probably in college, I probably buckled down like, all right, let me see what would happen if I just really took some serious stabs at this.
And I know you were a fan from way back when. A little bird told me, and that little bird's name was Maurice Broaddus.
Okay. When you were really got to do something about that leak in the organization.
Yeah, that's the information pouring out. But when you were younger and kind of a closeted horror fan, there was an adult in your community that came to you and made you feel less alone. I can't do that story justice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in church, a big church background. And I think I was in 4th grade, I believe. And, and it's, grandmotherly Sunday school teacher was telling us the story of Noah and the ark and everything. And we had one of those flannel graphs on the board behind her. And there was an ark there and there was Noah there. And she invited each of the students to come up and, put one of the animals on the boat, as it were. So, the pastor's son goes up, he puts up a lion, and then his buddy goes up, puts up a giraffe. And then I go up and I take some of the felt people and then put them on top of the water. Because I'm just like, this is the story you just told us, right? And so that marked the time I was kicked out of Sunday school class. And another Sunday school teacher heard about this incident, invited me over to his place. You got to keep in mind, this is a much more innocent age, as it were. And so I go to his house, we're eating pizza, and then he's like, hey, I got something want to show you. And so he takes me back to this back room. And again, much more innocent age. But he opens up this door, and it's like all of these wonders are in this room, right? There's like, he has all these VHS tapes of like Doctor Who episodes and Star Trek, the original series episodes. He has rows and rows of comic books, and then he has this whole row of just like Stephen King novels. And he's just like, yeah, I think you're secretly one of us. And that's when, so that's what made me feel a lot less alone in terms of what I was doing. I mean, it's still, looking back, it's still kind of a shame that we all had to like form the secret club within church. Like, we can't let anyone find out that we're into horror and comic books and sci-fi, but that's just where we found ourselves. But it was one of those forms. I even think back because that was like, man, I was like 4th or 5th grade at that point. And then, as it turns out, a buddy of mine, his mom was making him give up collecting comic books, so he gave me his comic book collection. And I remember picking up the first issue of X-Men. It was like X-Men issue 136, and that was the first comic book I ever read. And I was just like, oh no, I think I found the things I love reading. So that was it for me in reading. I was like, all right, we're going down this comic book wormhole right now.
So there it was, an inseparable bond for you forever. And so what is it that gets you to go into environmental toxicology first rather than straight toward writing and comics and this secret that's burning the whole time?
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I found it's funny. I just found a book that I wrote when I was in 5th grade, and it detailed out even back then that I wanted to be both a scientist and a writer. And apparently, 10-year-old Maurice also had a lot of anger issues. I was like reading this, and it was just like, oh my goodness! Apparently, I wanted to be a mad scientist on top of that. So there's that. But no, I was the first person in my family to go to college, and when I was discussing my choices over with my mother and everything, she was just like, and I mentioned the whole writing thing, and she was just like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay for someone to go, I'm not gonna pay for you to have a writing degree. Sorry, that's just not in the cards. I need you to do something respectable, was the word she used. And so I was like, all right, fine. What's your definition of respectable? And her definition of respectable was going into nursing. My mom is Jamaican, and so when she came over, she became a nurse, and that became her definition of a respectable occupation. So, we went back and forth over this possibility of me becoming a nurse, but I was just like, Mom, I am a professional daydreamer. Well, maybe not professional at the time, but I'm definitely a daydreamer. I mean, that's what I do. And so if I become a nurse, I'm going to die. I don't know what to tell you. People were just going to die. And so we went back and forth. And so science, me being a biology major, that became our compromise right there. So went through school, I beginning of school, my freshman year of college, I set down the pen. I'm not doing writing. I'm pursuing my science degree and all that kind of stuff. And I quit writing. And I think I quit writing for 2 years before one day I just found myself, pen in hand, pen starting to sketch out a story. And I'm just like, no, because this is what I am meant to do. I am a writer. This is what I do. I do this like and so I just started, using all of my electives to take writing classes and different sort of writing classes, all the way through independent study courses. I basically have an undeclared major in English alongside my biology degree. So yeah, and so, but when I graduated, the first job while I was still in school, I was working at the environmental toxicology lab. And then when I graduated, the guy who ran the business offered me the full-time position. So I was like, well, I have a job in hand. It's a job that allows me plenty of time to get my writing done. We're just going to do this for as long as we can. And so I did that for about 20 years.
So after those 2 years, and that must have been a different world. I can't even imagine a Maurice that doesn't write. But 2 years you're not writing,
right?
At it full time, or what does it look like once you decide that I'm going to pursue this at least quasi seriously? And when do you decide I'm going to go all the way serious?
So let's see. So I graduate in 1993 with my bright and shiny biology degree, I immediately start writing what would become my first novel. And so I start writing at 93. I finish it in 2000, which also was the first year. It was also the year I got married. And then once I completed it, I took a year to revise it. And so then I finished my revision on, I believe it was May 13th, 2001. Finished the revision of the book. I know this date because my wife was in labor at the time with my firstborn son, and I really, really, really wanted to finish the revision of the rough draft of the draft of my novel. So I was like, honey, if you could just hold it for a little bit longer, I am almost done. I can get this done. I know labor's going on for a bit, but I don't know, hold your legs together, do whatever. I'm almost done here. I finished the rough draft. I finished the revision. We shoot to the hospital. Get there, just too late for her to have an epidural. So she has to go natural childbirth, which was not what we had planned. And so, 22 years later, she still hasn't quite gotten over this fact. But,
God, no, how has she not murdered you?
I know, right? I know, right? But yeah, so, wait, what was your question? I get off on these stories.
About when you transitioned from you were gonna work the job, you were gonna be gainfully employed, and you were gonna have time to write. But then when you go from have time to write to I'm definitely gonna be so serious writing that I will be revising while my wife's in labor. When does that decision get made?
It doesn't get made. Like I said, this is just who I am. So when we were dating, she knew I was writing. When we were on the honeymoon, I was writing. Obviously I would take breaks, but but during the honeymoon, I was writing. I could still remember the short stories I was working on the honeymoon, as a matter of fact. Like none of those short stories, hang on. I think one of those short stories did eventually see the light of day. Nope. None of those short stories I was working on at the time saw the light of day. Same with that first novel, never saw the light of day. But at this point, though, I'm like, no, this is serious. This is what I'm about. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to pursue. And it was that first novel. The reason I wanted to get it done is because I got it done in 2001, and I had no idea what the next steps were for publishing. Just like I was so focused on get it done, get it done, get it done. Once I got it done, I was just like, what do I do now? And actually, I asked that question, what do I do now? And so in answer to that question, not really an answer to the question, but in pursuing an answer to this question, I end up writing, because like I said, I was a huge comic book collector at this point. And so I wrote my favorite comic book at the time, which was Starman. It was being written by James Robinson. And so I wrote this comic. I wrote James Robinson at Starman, and just like, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm a horror writer, finished my first novel. I have no idea what to do next. Got any advice for me? And so he publishes my letter in the issue of Starman. And to which he responds, I should probably write an advice column for writers. And then that's pretty much the only response he gives me was that, not what to do next or anything like that. Just he probably ought to start an advice column. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, that was not real helpful. But a couple weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, because back then, if you publish if you send in a letter, if you didn't say otherwise, they would publish your address also. And so, and I didn't say otherwise. So they published my letter. They published my address. 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, and it's from a writer. His name's Wayne Allen Sally, and he's just like, hey, couple things. 1, I'm a horror writer also. 2, Starman's my favorite comic book also. 3, the World Horror Convention is going to be held up here in Chicago this year. Why don't you come to it? We can meet, and I can introduce you around. And so I turned to my wife, and and now newborn son. As a matter of fact, she's also pregnant with the second one. And I'm like, hey, I'm gonna pop out of town for a week to meet a guy I've never met before, to be introduced to a bunch of folks I've never met before, in the hopes that I will somehow figure out what it is I'm supposed to do with my writing career. We good? All right, I'm out. And so that's what I did.
Your wife continues to grow.
I know, right? Remember, 22 years later, we're still together. So there is that. So the sun does actually pay off at some point. But yeah, so off I go to the World Horror Convention, and my life has basically changed as I meet some of the folks who would go on to become some of my best friends, still in my life. As a matter of fact, I've talked to a good chunk of them in the last couple of days, as a matter of fact. But they introduced me around. I was welcomed into the horror community and started to figure out, the whole business side of being a writer.
And do you have a feeling when you're there at last that I'm where I belong? Here I am. These are my people.
Well, let's see. Was it at that World Horror? Because leading up to the World Horror, they had a writing contest as a part of it, and I ended up getting again I got an honorable mention in the short story contest. And my award is actually behind me right now. And it was an award, and it was handed to me by Neil Gaiman. And I'm just like, one of my favorite writers is handing me an award about my writing. I am, once again, I firmly believe I'm on the right track with this. And then the next year I go on to win the World Horrors writing contest for short fiction. And then that story ended up getting published in Weird Tales.